It's a beautiful sunset, and before I go in the ocean to get a couple of shots, I will answer some questions about my gear that I use in and out the water. It's a long episode with a lot of technical stuff, so let's dive right in.
The main cameras that I use for my photography is the Canon 1DX Mark II and the Canon 5D Mark IV. They're both really good. The only thing is that this is like a smaller one, which is really good for traveling, hiking, mountain biking, or to put it in my water housing because it's super easy to handle. The big one, the 1DX, is a bit heavier. But it's super fast, and you can the grip is really good, and it's just a camera that is very reliable, and whatever you do, it will never fuck it up. If you start as a photographer, what camera should you buy? It's pretty hard to answer because it depends a little bit on your budget. But for kite surfing or sports in general, I would definitely recommend a camera that has at least like 5 or 6 frames per second. But I think what even more important is the lens. If you want to focus on wide angles, then I would say something between 16-35 millimeters, or if you want to have a little bit more zoom, go for something like a 70-200. And if your focus is more video, then I would suggest to look into a mirrorless camera because they most of the time have in-house body stabilization, which is very good for video. And also the viewfinder is electronic, and you can basically look through the viewfinder while you're shooting, and that's a big difference if you compare it to a DSLR. I mainly shoot in manual mode, and the reason for that is that I want to have full control over my camera. Oh, look at the birds. How sick is that? Wow. So yeah, I want to have full control over my camera settings. For example, if you shoot into the sun, the camera might think it's a very bright shot, but maybe you want to have it slightly overexposed, otherwise you lose details in the shadows. There's some occasions where I would go for a semi priority setting. Maybe when I have it in a water housing, if I'm not super flexible to change it quickly, or if I shoot with a remote camera and I don't have direct access. As you can see, the light changed a lot, and that's what happens. And I think it's a good plan to pack my bags, go home and finish it there.
The best setup? Well, that's really hard because it depends on the type of photo you want to get. But when I have to travel and I can only bring one camera and one lens, I would probably go for the 5D Mark IV because it's nice and small and I can just bring it everywhere. And I probably would go for the 50mm. The 50mm is pretty much what we see with our eyes, and it's just suitable for a lot of different situations, for portraits, for landscapes, for street photography, for sports photography. You can literally do everything with the 50mm. The lens that I use the most for kite surfing, I think, is a 70-200. This lens is a moneymaker and should be in every bag of every sports photographer. My next camera purchase, I know Canon is coming with a new camera, a mirrorless camera, and it looks very interesting to me. Mirrorless cameras have a couple of advantages over DSLRs. They're lighter, they're faster, they're more compact. Sometimes it's also very nice to see what you get through the viewfinder. But I also know that the DSLRs have a few advantages as well. They're super reliable, and for sports it's really good to have the optical viewfinder. especially in low light situations. I know camera equipment is very expensive, and especially as a beginning photographer, you just can't buy everything straight away. And when I started photography, I invested everything that I earned straight back into my equipment. These days I get support from a photo shop in Amsterdam, Calumet, and whenever I have a job and I need something specific that I don't have, I can give them a call and they can sort me out. They also got me in touch with Canon the Netherlands, and with them I have a very cool collaboration where I can show my work and share my passion. I capsized once with the boat, and I had my camera bag on the boat with all my equipment in there, and the bag was open. It was super stupid. I would never do it again. But anyways, everything went overboard. I lost everything, and luckily it was insured, so I could get everything back. But although it was a very bad situation, I think I learned a very important lesson out of it, and I think that's the good thing. There's a couple of solutions from a couple of brands with rain covers, but I always have the feeling you don't really have access to all the buttons and you can't change the camera settings that quickly. Sometimes a t-shirt or a jacket helps as well, just to wrap it around your camera gear when you're on the beach. And maybe a little tip that I sometimes do, for example this lens, if you use autofocus, what I do, I get a little bit of tape and I put it over these areas, because usually there's a lot of sand going in between here, and then if you use the autofocus or if you use the focus ring, it's very squeaky. So maybe that's something to try. I don't really have a solution for making gear that isn't waterproof outside of a water housing. If you have any tips for me, let me know. First of all, I use the Aquatech water housing, and for me it's just a very good solution because they're super solid and they can hold heavy surf, and they also have the options with the buttons in the back, and I can literally change everything in the water. So camera wise, I put the 5D Mark IV in the water housing because it's nice and light, so it's easy for me to handle. Lens wise, it depends a little bit of what kind of type of shot I want, but I usually go to a 16-35. You have to be very close to your subject, but it also gives you the feeling that you're right there. And what I also really like is the 50mm in the water housing. I had a couple of really good shots with that as well. I try to keep it on manual because I can just literally change everything in this water housing, but sometimes I shoot underwater as well, and then if I can't change it that quickly, it's good to use a priority setting. If you shoot with the water housing, you have to put a port in front of the water housing, and for different lenses there's different ports. There's mainly two different types of ports, and one of them is the round dome port, which is also a wet port, and the other one is a flat port, which is a dry port. And we all had these frustrating moments where you got the best shot ever and there's just that one water drop right in front of somebody's face, and that just ruins the whole photo. The wet port is the port that you have to dip, and when you bring it up, there's a film of water that is created over the dome and you shoot through it. And to prevent getting water drops on a dome port, you have to spit a lot on it and lick it and then dip it and bring it up, and then you got about 15 seconds to take the photo. The flat port, which is the dry port, you have to keep it dry. If you still have some drops on it, there's a couple of things you can do. You can put some candle wax on it and then just rub it in till you don't see it anymore, and then the water drops should just go to the side. If that doesn't work, there's a couple of things you can do. I most of the time bring a little wiper with me. So if there's still a bit of water on there, I can just wipe it off. What sometimes also works is rub a little bit behind your ears and then just rub it onto the glass, and that should also like get the drops to the side. I had a couple of times that the surf was so strong that I tried to hold my camera, but the waves just like ripped the water housing out of my hand and I couldn't do anything about it. I always make sure I have a little wrist leash that I attach to my water housing and my wrist, so whenever that happens I won't lose my camera. Then you also have to make sure you're able to move around in the water quickly, and therefore I have these fins, and I really like the fin fins because they have a nice strong tip, but they're very soft and comfortable on the foot side. I also use a helmet to protect myself from getting hit by somebody that gets too close, and luckily I don't need it a lot, but it's better to have a fin in your helmet than a fin in your head for sure. Well, that was it about the gear. I hope you liked it. If you still have questions or you just want to let me know something, put it down in the comments, and I hope to see you next time.